Welcome to our webinar, Ensuring Schedule Quality for Effective Schedule Risk Analysis. My name is Michael Trumper. I'm one of the principals here at Intaver Institute, and I've been working on project risk analysis and management with the software and in a consulting practice for over 20 years now. Before we start in the webinar, if you're new to our webinars, I'll just show you how you can participate in the webinar in the next slide. So you should see a pane at the top right of your screen, unless you've moved it. It gives you some options about how to listen to the webinar. For audio, I always recommend using the mic and speakers if you have them, because the quality tends to be better if you're going over a line rather than your telephone. There's questions. If you have questions during the presentation, please feel free to ask them. Now, we won't be looking at those. We'll be monitoring them, but if you have questions, we won't be answering them until the end of the session, where we'll go through the questions as they've come in. If you do have a problem with technically you can't hear, whether you can't hear me or you can't see the screen, we will try and resolve that during the webinar, but otherwise we'll just answer the questions as we go through the webinar. So for the agenda, we're just going to quickly go over the importance of schedule quality, specifically for when we're running schedule risk analysis. We'll look at basically risky project, and I'm calling this, we have two different schedule checks within risky project. One that's very intrinsic. It occurs automatically whenever you open or create a file in risky project. And then there is the we're calling it DCM 14 point, but it's our schedule diagnostics that's based on the DCMA 14 point schedule quality checks. And then we'll go into a live demonstration. This webinar, I hope, is going to last about 30 minutes. And so if you stick with us, we can go through this. And hopefully you'll come away with a few tips and tricks to help you fix any schedule issues you might have. So the reason we decided on this topic for this webinar is consistently with some of our new customers who are just moving into the process. Typically, they may be a new company, or they've decided that they need to improve their processes. So they're in so they are often they're starting to do earned value management, and then they want to do schedule risk assessment after that. And one of the problems that they have is that their schedules are just often more of a plan than an actual high quality schedule. And so the schedules that they come in, and we often go through how do you create a risk model, and we do the how-tos, and then the biggest obstacle that they have is that they suddenly bring in their schedules in, and they're getting some really strange results. And it turns out that their schedules have a lot of issues in them that need to be resolved. So they have to before you get into doing the schedule risk analysis, you really have to solve your ability or solve the schedule quality issues. And because of that, obviously we put it in, we've had a schedule logic check from day one, but then we also brought in this DCM, the schedule diagnostics, which are very explicit that you have to run to help our customers out. So in Monte Carlo, typically in Monte Carlo schedule risk assessment, we need the precedent network, which is basically your schedule, is a logic network, and it has to be structurally sound and dynamic. And by what we mean is the logic must allow the schedule to update correctly when activity duration, start or finish times are updated. So it must, so when if an activity because of a risk occurs when we're running simulations, at each iteration of a simulation, let's say a risk occurs and it pushes out task estimated by, let's say, 10 days, that has to propagate down the logic network, the precedent network, down through its successors, so they should all react. And if there's too many hard constraints or they're not connected properly, what happens is the analysis that you get is of low quality or completely invalid. So we need to deal with this schedule quality right off the bat. So if you're interested in looking at this, I've just included some key references from Dr. David Hewlett and Associates. They have some good papers on there, and a few more. You can look these up. But what they're saying is that if you can improve the quality of your schedules, making sure that the logic works properly, that you will be able to improve the forecasts significantly by going through this process. Hopefully, it's done. Hopefully, it's done before you go into you import it into RiskyProject. But if you don't, we'll show you how you can identify these problems within RiskyProject. So in RiskyProject, we have a schedule quality check. I shouldn't quite call it that, but it's a logic check. And we've had this since the very first iteration when we released the software in 2004. And if you haven't, if you've used RiskyProject or you're thinking of RiskyProject, if you come in, what it does is that we have show links, and you can see links, the precedent network showing the links between tasks are generally blue. But what it does is when we bring it in, the moment it's bring as we render, if there are possible logic issues, these links will show up as red lines. And you can see right here on this little image right here, that's how they appear. The schedule diagnostics, and then we also have the more I call that implicit, but explicit one where we're actually going to run a diagnostics, and it's based on the DCMA 40-point schedule checks. So I say the schedule logic. So what I say is we automatically, the moment you bring it in, there's no way to turn it on or off, and it doesn't really have any performance issues. If the algorithm, as we render the precedent network, if it sees that there are potential logic errors, such as circular logic, out of order tasks, missing logic, sort of dangling tasks, these potential logic errors are identified with red task links in the Gantt chart view. Now, to be fair, it doesn't actually tell you what they are, but what it's telling you is giving you a visual check that there may be some issues in your schedule that you need to address. Now, from my experiences, sometimes they're actually, it shows up as red, but they're not actually an error. They're just I would say, part of the schedule. It thinks there's an error. It thinks that there might be an out of order task, or that there's possible issues. And that's what it's really all it's doing. Say there might be possible issues that you might want to look at. And for me, what I always do if I'm looking at, and it's a fairly simple schedule, I'll just sort of look at the predecessors and successors and see what the relationship links are in there and see if they need to be resolved or not. And then there's what I've called it DCMA 14-point diagnostics. But just to be clear that it is based on the DCMA 14-point analysis diagnostics. And the actual tests on there are developed by the DCMA, stands for the Defense Contract Management Agency, DCMA, to evaluate the schedule, the quality and reliability of project schedules. It has 14 key metrics that it looks at. By improving these or resolving them, you can improve the schedule quality and reliability. Obviously, it's going to identify, especially in some of them, whether they're on the critical path or there's out of order tasks, it's going to identify risk early. And it supports earned value management as well as other performance measures and SRA. So if you are currently doing earned value management, you're probably in a good space right now, because you would have to have a reasonably good quality schedules to be able to support your earned value management process. So one of the things when I'm running the DCMA tests, there's 14, and this is a list of all the checks that can be run. And I like to, I've actually ordered them in sort of where I think from my own experience, what the priority of them are. If you're in a hurry and you need to, and you want to, and you have a big schedule and you need to resolve the most highest priority issues, I sort of rank them, missing logic, the next critical path test. We'll talk a little bit about the critical path test because it can be not a difficult one to run, but there are some constraints on that you should be aware of if you're running that on a very, very big schedule. Relationship types, that's like start, finish. Those types of relationship. Leads, negative lags, positive lags, hard constraints, invalid dates, and then negative float, excessive float. And then these other ones are a little bit high duration tasks. I think that's, and that can be adjusted within the test. The default, I think, is 44 days. It doesn't want you to have tasks longer than that in the DCMA guidance. But if that's the way your schedule is and you haven't deconstructed it down to smaller activities, that's a judgment call. And resources, missed tasks, baseline execution index. Some of these ones are going to be lower priority as we go down to in terms of being able to resolve all the issues you might have in your schedule. And I just put this in there because there's a lot of schedules and you can see a lot of issues, but you really want to make sure that you get the missing logic, that you've got a critical path that works. Relationship types, the hard constraints, the lags, and the float are really are ones that you want to be able to resolve to make sure you have a valid result from your analysis, improve the quality. So next, we're just going to go into a demonstration. And in the demo, we're just going to overview the built-in quality check so you can see it on a very simple schedule. And then I'm going to show the new, go over the schedule diagnostics, how to run it, how to configure it. And it's also going to have a preview of the upcoming UI improvements we have with the upcoming version 8 that's coming out in the next month or so. to improve the usability. So let me just switch over. And we're looking at a very simple schedule in RiskyProject. And what we can see here is once we bring the schedule in, over here, we can see possible, it points out possible logic errors. Now you can turn this off and on just to show, we have show links, just to make this a little bit more explicit, and show errors. Now one of the things is this project has some actuals in it, so there are some start and finish times that might be a little bit out of order originally, but what these do is they show possible errors that you might need to resolve. So again, it's just pointing out possible logic errors that come through. Now, one of the things I like to do when I do see this is I'll open up the predecessors, which is generally shown by default in the thing, but I will also add the successors. We can add the successors simply by going into on the grid view, going into, and you can insert the column before. So if I hide this, we're going to go in, and I'm just going to hit S to bring us down the left, and it will show the successors. And this shows me the linkage between all of the activities, and that gives me an idea about where I could look at and see what the issues might be behind it. So that's just a little tip. If you see some red lines, take a look at the successors and see what the relationship is between these two. If it's start, finish, lags, float, anything like that that might affect it, and you can take a look at it, and you can see right in here the predecessors. You can start to see, and it shows you what the finish to start. And what's happened is this, I believe this is probably started before this one in the language because we have some actuals in here, and that's causing that. That's okay. So the next thing is that we have the scheduled diagnostics. Now, if you are in version 7.2 or earlier, where we have the scheduled diagnostics, and we introduced this particular version of it in version 7. If you click schedule diagnostics, it will run the diagnostics right away. And it's not a bad, which is not a bad thing, because it will just run on the pre-configured. But this is one of the new dialog boxes we brought in that allows you to configure the checks before you go. So if we were in version 7.2, what will happen is that you will go directly into this view right here, and then you can go in and configure the activities that you want, or the schedule checks that you want to run. In that case, what I always do is I will just open up a blank. I will open up a blank project plan. It'll be blank, and I'll just click the schedule, and you can go into the schedule diagnostics before you even have a schedule in there. So, and set that up ahead of time. Now, one of the reasons why I would do that is, in particular, one of the things we've added here is this. In particular, this one enables the DCMA 12 test. And we'll take a look at that. What the DCMA 12 test is, the critical path test. And we have one of the issues with that is that if you have a really extremely large project schedule, and I'll give you the example, we had a customer doing evaluation, and they were running, they had a master project with 20, 30 something sub projects. and they were trying to run the critical path in RiskyProject, this particular test, so they hadn't turned it off. And that DCMA test, and we'll look exactly, we can sort of see what it is. That DCMA test runs on runs a critical path test, and each test can only use a single processor, single core, if you want to call that. And so it's running, and then you're running basically a critical path on 100,000 activities, 50,000 activities. And what it does is it actually adds, for every activity that's not incomplete, it adds, I believe it's 600 days to those activities. And as you go down the critical path, at the end of it, it should push out 600 days. It does this as a test, but it's going to do it on a single processor. And so like when we run a Monte Carlo simulation, we use all the processors that are available, multi-threading, all the memory, and so you can run the speed of the processes can be much quicker. If you run the DCMA test on a huge schedule, that critical path test could take hours, and that's what was happening here because it's running on a single processor. So it actually, what happens is if you ran the critical path test just on that, the diagnostics actually took longer than if we ran ran a Monte Carlo simulation on the schedule. So that's just something to be aware of. So when we go in there, we can look at this, and this is one I've just gone in and said, well, I want to highlight some of the schedules. You can turn a diagnostics check, any of these tests on or off by running that. And as I said, on the float, we can say how long the float is or task duration. Relationship types. So you can change this down if you just want to check out your, like, the schedule logic and relationship types, maybe the lag, if you have, or float, you can just turn those off and do a quicker one if you're running on a big schedule. And you can color code it. Now, one of the changes that might be coming up, still we haven't tested it, is we might take away the color coding and just put those into the use the color coding for showing which tests were pass and fail. So there's a few things here. If you wanted to, you can click there and it'll give you, go bring up help. Next thing we can do is we go to continue. And so once we go into continue, it's going to run the test. So it's run a schedule. This is a very simple one. We only have a couple there. And you can see, and this is going to tell us how many activities had missing logic. And if we want, we can get a help. And if you want to see what that test is, we'll go onto our help system and it will tell you what that DCMA check is doing on logic. And you can see what their pass and fail is. This is the percentage incomplete task with no predecessor and no successor should not be greater than 5%. So you're always going to have, in this one in particular, you're always going to have some activities. The first activity and the last activity probably not going to have a predecessor or successor. So generally you're going to have a few, but you want to be able, that's a key one. We can also, when we go in, and if you want to see which ones are affected by that, we can go down and look, and it will highlight those in this view here. And if we want to see it in the schedule, We can click on that, and again, it will select them in your schedule. So it'll tell you where to look. I'm not a big, particularly a big fan of that, especially on large ones. And you can see, look at so we have that, and we can go down and see which ones have failed. Then we can also look at the task statistics and other schedule metrics here. So it includes all of that. One of the things is we can, on either of these, well, this will go into here, and you can go in and if you want to look at develop a report or create a report, and I tend to like this a little bit better, as I can go in, select all, and copy. And I can go to an Excel spreadsheet. And create a little report that tells us what activity, name of the activity, and what tests it failed and that need to be resolved. One of the reasons I recommend doing this, it's probably easier if you're importing a schedule from, let's say, Microsoft Project or Primavera or Power Project or any of these other scheduling tools, is to actually take this report and provide that so that you update it, provide that to your scheduler, or if you are the scheduler, update it in the source schedule, whatever it's in, update it there, and then bring it back into RiskyProject so that they are aligned between each other. So if you just update it in RiskyProject, again, it's not going to update it automatically. So you can keep them aligned. So I always recommend that once we run, if you're running the schedule and you've got the results out of here, that you create the copy, paste it into Excel, and then you've got a record, and then you can hand it off or use that to then go resolve the issues in the source schedule rather than in RiskyProject, because again, you'll get them misaligned on each other, and we want to be making sure that you're comparing apples, not apples and oranges. The same thing can be done if you want to. You can copy those and you can paste those similarly into, and it will tell you. I'll give you a brief update about how high-level view of how your schedule check went. And so hopefully, we're going fairly quickly through this, is that using the schedule diagnostics, I always recommend the first pass when you go through, bring it in, run your schedule. If you see red lines, that tells you there's something going on there. You could go through there, but if you want to schedule, I would then recommend running the schedule diagnostics. It'll probably give you a better idea of why you're seeing those red links in your schedule. Last step is I recommend, if you're bringing the schedule in from another scheduling tool, importing it, is that you use copy and paste, basically select all of the results. Oh, that's why it's not doing that. Select all of the results. I just need to hold down the left mouse button and just drag it down. copy, creates it in basically behind the scenes a CSV file, and then put it into Excel and use that as a report to be able to resolve the issues, and then re-import the schedule or reopen the schedule in RiskyProject before you run your schedule risk analysis. Okay, that's the end of our schedule right now. Webinar, sorry. If we do have any questions, or concerns, now is the time. I'm looking at our webinar. We don't have any questions. So at this point, I'd like to thank everyone for sitting in on the webinar. If you do have any questions, please feel free to contact us at www.endeavor.com, sales or support at endeavor.com. If you get onto our website, please give us a call, and we'd be happy to help you out with any issues that were brought up today in terms of schedule quality or any other issues that you're having with your schedule risk analysis. Thank you, and enjoy your day.